There, thought I had it, nailed it, I'm listening to that.
Thank you. I have a bad back.
Yeah, I got bad knees, so I'm standing
I'm
up.
sitting on my lap.
Oh, it's in Hopkins, St. Teresa's in Hopkins, yeah.
Hello everybody, welcome. Let me just, is everybody okay? Does everybody have a seat? I will grab chairs while the show is going. Like I told Pamela, I'll be like a ghost. Just don't pay attention to me. I'm just gonna be very inconspicuous. But welcome everybody. Good evening. Welcome to Majors and Quinn. We're so happy that you're joining us today. I am Sarah. I'm one of the booksellers here. I am so pleased that you're joining us today to celebrate Pamela Carter Joern's book, At the Corner of Past and Future. A few housekeeping things before we get on with the show tonight. We will hear from Pamela in conversation with Sheila O'Connor. Then there will be a time at the end of the program for audience questions. After Q&A, please allow the authors to move to the signing counter, or the author to move to the signing counter, which is the glass display case you pass on your way to the store. You may line up there and say hello and get a signed copy of the book. If you do buy a book here this evening, you are not only supporting the author, but also a locally owned independent bookstore, and we cannot thank you enough. So finally, please allow me to introduce our guest. Pamela Carter Joern has authored 4 published works of fiction. She has twice won a Nebraska Book Award. She has written 6 locally produced plays and taught at the Loft Literary Center for a number of years. She lives in South Minneapolis. This is her first nonfiction book. Sheila O'Connor is the author of 6 novels, including Evidence of V, a novel in fragrance, Facts and Fictions, a multi-genre writer. O'Connor's book, Evidence of V, incorporates fiction, lyric flash forms, archival documents, memoir, and historical research to reconstruct the buried history of incarcerated girls. Honors for Evidence of V include the Minnesota Book Award, the Forward Editor's Choice Award, and Marshall's Project's Best Criminal Justice Books of the Year, as well as others. Please join me in welcoming Pamela and Sheila. Testing.
Well, Pam, I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk to the group for just a minute before I launch into my
Can't hear you in the back.
conversation. Can't hear me in the back?
Louder,
Okay.
yeah.
Not in the front either.
Now can you hear me?
No.
Oh, I'm just so grateful to see all of your beautiful faces. It's a beautiful evening, and I know there are a whole bunch of other things you could be doing. That would be a lot of fun out there, even.
Don't hold this part.
Okay, don't touch the cord. Yeah, all right.
Let's just test it out.
Okay, anyway, I just am very grateful that you are here, and I see people from so many different pieces of my life, and it's just lovely. So, and thank you to Majors and Quinn, a wonderful institution, been here a long time, glad to know it, and thank you to Sheila, Sheila was my fiction professor at Hamline University when I worked on my MFA, and Maureen's fiction teacher when she worked on her MFA, and we would not be published authors without her. So, thank you. And I have known Pam 25 years. We figured this out longer than that, but 25 years since you graduated from the program. I've read all of your books, and it's really exciting to be here to be in conversation with you tonight about this new book. And I wondered if to start you would read a piece from the book so that people could hear your voice, get a sense of the work, if they haven't read anything in the book yet. And the piece I was wondering about was shards. Okay, now I'm going to try to put this very touchy microphone in this stand. How's that? No? Because I can't hold the book and a microphone. I'm not that coordinated. All right. This is called Shards, and I would dedicate this to anyone who's raised children who've left home eventually. The notebooks called to me like a beacon across time. I stumbled upon them while packing for a move, piled forgotten on a basement shelf. I dared to look inside. Each page, scrawled in my daughter's loopy, prepubescent hand, contained a different list. Her stuffed bears' names, all 66 of them. A week of the year opposite each name headlined My Bear of the Week Club. Names she might someday bestow on her children, Pablo, Sean, Dustin, Gabriel, Tony, as if she imagined her family an international community of boys. Books and characters in books, places she longed to go. The most intriguing list was fashioned after Harriet the Spy. One side of the page revealed secret hiding places where she had planted a gold bond stamp. Behind Mom and Dad's headboard, under the bathroom sink, in a vase in the dining room. On the other side, she recorded observations from each day's spying mission. Still there. No one saw it, and alarmingly, gone. She kept this up for days until she abruptly stopped. Some other interest eclipsed this passion, some other page of her secret life. On the day I discovered this list, my daughter was 17, at least 7 or 8 years older than her Harriet persona. Nevertheless, I took myself on her patrol around the house. Under the bathroom sink, gone. Behind Mom and Dad's headboard, still there. Wherever I found a long-hidden gold bond stamp, I left it. I hoped that she had placed at least one stamp on an object that would stay in the house, mystifying its new owners if they ever ventured to look, say, under the spice drawer in the kitchen. When I was a child, one of our favorite games was treasure hunt. Either I or one of my brothers, or sometimes our mother, if she wasn't too busy, would create the hunt. Those who got to follow the trail waited impatiently in the living room with the curtains drawn shut. I pounded on the piano to pass the time. At last the hunt maker would announce that we could begin, and we were off. A slip of paper on the kitchen table might read, "Go to the place where Dad stores his tools." Off we raced to the cellar. On and on, or a note tucked under a screwdriver. Find Jack. Outside to track down our dog Jack and see what lay beneath his collar. On and on to the chicken house, the outhouse, the dilapidated shed, the beet loader, the haystack, the 4 o'clocks in the garden. Nothing was off limits. Some part of the note had to be visible from some angle. That simple rule kept us racing about, lured by the promise of reward, usually no more than a slice of jam and bread or a piece of fruit. Years later, I tried to reenact this game with my children, but it was never as exciting for children living in the confines of a city yard as it was for us, tearing all about the countryside. Now, on the day I retraced my daughter's mission for Harriet the Spy, I felt the same mounting exhilaration. Losing and finding, losing and finding. I breathed it to myself as I searched for traces of my 10-year-old daughter, evidence beyond my memory, more of her than I had glimpsed at the time. Peering down a hallway of her life, I waited for the open door and wondered what I might find behind it. I have traveled in the American Southwest. My husband and I collected pottery. even before the Southwest style became trendy. In museums in Albuquerque and Santa Fe, I have stood before glass cases and stared at shards of broken pottery uncovered in excavations. Fragments of civilizations buried by layers of other civilizations, nothing left behind except to piece traces. Experts study the shards, the intricacy of design, the evenness of the pot, the methods of forming and firing, and from these impressions they make logical guesses about the culture represented. Archaeologists postulate various theories about the sudden abandonment of the Anasazi cliff dwellings, suggesting everything from an environmental disaster to violence or warfare. They tell all that from shards. Shards are what I have left of my children's childhoods. Grown into accomplished and confident women, they constantly amaze and delight me with who they have become. And yet I am secretly on the lookout for who they have been. My oldest daughter, a philosophy major who had little taste for Hollywood, once referred to the blockbuster movie everyone else had seen as Titanica. My husband and I laughed, remembering that years before, during a discussion of the Middle East, she asked, "Is that candy bar named after Beirut?" Our younger daughter, she of Harriet the Spy, spent a year studying in Seville as a college student. Struggling with decisions about housing, she wrote, "I've decided that I am a person who at least needs to think she's making her own choices." "No kidding," her dad said, remembering the child who backed herself into a corner of her bedroom and shouted in his face, "You can kill me if you want to, but I'm not wearing that turtleneck." Once I went on a scavenger hunt of wild proportions. It was, of all unlikely things, a church Halloween party. My husband and I arrived costumed as his and hers outhouses. Entombed in moving cartons we had painted brown, half moons scrawled on the doors in yellow marker. Quickly we were divided into groups and sent around the city following clues. Out of necessity, the two of us had to abandon our costumes, a lucky break since the hunt took us inside restaurants and shopping centers to pick up pre-planted objects, mints, menus, or matchbooks. Some of the clues were mysteriously written, naming landmark buildings and requiring a bit of historical sleuthing to find the right one and count the number of windows on the south side. I remember that it was raining, and we shrieked and laughed as we piled in and out of a too-small car and slapped through the puddles, dotting our feet and the backs of our calves with mud. We two normally attired participants, my husband and I, were in the company of an orange-wigged clown, a man dressed as a woman whose balloon breasts kept popping, a pirate with a patch over one eye, and a run-of-the-mill goblin. On the day I followed my daughter's clues around our familiar house, I wondered what disguise she had been wearing throughout her childhood. I had watched her, it seems, through the slats of a split-rail fence. I only thought I saw the whole picture, a child entire in her pursuit of friends, her gift for funny language. She once complained about having to play petrifying songs at her piano lessons, like Pomp and Circumference. Her incontestable will, but it turned out these were mere fragments that I was privy to. The rest of her lay underground, yet to be discovered, open only to her own excavations. Occasionally, when I see the remnant of the child I remember in either of my daughter's actions, I quiver with a pang of loss, sharp and unexpected. I long to scoop that once familiar small body into my arms. Once in a great while, I still come across a clue I haven't seen before. A rose pressed in a forgotten book, a line of poetry, a postcard written but never mailed. From this excavated artifact, I learned something new about the child my daughter was. I follow her down hallway after hallway, around every corner, crumb to crumb like Hansel and Gretel through the forest. I add this new information to my filtered memories. I shine a light on it, hold it up next to the young woman I know today, and like the rotation of a kaleidoscope, the shards drop into a slightly altered pattern. The rose, the poem, the unmailed postcard offer incontrovertible evidence that my daughter's lives are, and always have been, their own. Even when they were young, even when their daily lives weighed so heavily on my determination to get it right, even then they were escaping to their own fields of dreams. I turned the chipped shard over and over in my hand, in wonderment that a winged creature ever rested near. I love a mystery, I say to myself, as I tenderly replace the fragment exactly the way I found it. We have a seat up here.
And a seat here.
And a seat up here, yeah, so 2 seats if anybody needs them. Pam, that was so beautiful. Oh, thank you. I love that piece so much. I think all of us can relate to this idea of not whether we've had children or not, but just coming upon fragments of things that were part of our lives at one time and aren't anymore. So I wanted to start with this idea about shards because for me it seemed to be kind of a central metaphor for the book, both the way the book is constructed and the form that you're using on these shorter pieces. And I wondered if you could talk for just a minute or two about your approach to this work, the fact that these are quite brief pieces, and you're a fiction writer, that's what you've written, short stories, much longer than this, novels, of course, much longer than this, but this is the first time I've seen these kinds of short pieces together. So I wondered if you could talk a bit about the shards of this book. I could if I knew, let's see, why they are this way?
Well, or just like what was in your mind kind of as you began to compile this book? You know, you must have had quite a number of pieces before you thought, oh, maybe I'm going to gather these into something.
Right, okay, that I can do. Kind of like the book of short stories I wrote kind of came about the same way. I had a few stories and I just liked to write stories, and eventually I had enough stories that I thought, oh, maybe I'd have a book of stories if I wrote 1 or 2 more stories. And some of these essays I wrote way back when we were at Hamlin 25 years ago. Some of them are very recent, and even the old ones, once I thought, oh, maybe I could have enough of these for a book, I took out and they have further reflections on them. I did a lot of pretty serious editing. But my dilemma when I wanted to try to put a book together was, well, how do I put these very short, sort of unrelated pieces into a book? Because I knew it couldn't be a classic memoir, because a memoir, tells a whole story arc. And I don't have a remarkable life story. I was, never abducted by aliens or... and what interested me were reflections on ordinary life. So then I just found there were some similar themes that I could group them in, and it turned out there are 3 sections in the book. The first one is called Intersections of Time and Place. And that one is a lot about the landscape of Nebraska and my home. And then the second section is Intersections of Memory and Truth, which I discovered reading my own essays is something I like to think about. And the third section is called Intersections of Life and Art. And that has some things about the writing experience, and so that's kind of how it came about.
And then did you write new pieces to fill in what was not there yet, or you had them all?
I would say I collected the pieces from various things in my life. One of them was once a sermon.
Okay.
One of them was once a classroom paper, and some were new.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And the book has a lot to do with time. And I was so moved by your reflections on time in your piece, Salvador Dali and Me. The idea of the melting of time with the image of his clock, and the inability to truly track or keep time, which seems to be one of the sorrows in the book in a way. It's maybe something that you're both reconciling and admitting and looking hard at, but there is a sorrow about, I think, the way time can't be saved, maybe.
I think, well, most of you here know me, maybe not quite all of you, but most of you, and if you know me, you know that 13 years ago, 12 years ago, I had ovarian cancer. And when I had cancer and went through chemotherapy, and I know there are others here who've had that experience, but I had a very different relationship with time. You know, we all know, because we're mortal, that time is fleeting and we're eventually going to die, but somehow when you have a life-threatening disease, that gets to be a lot more present. And so I did a lot of thinking about time and my relationship with time and how I wanted to spend my time, and do you really spend time, or, you know, so that's what all of that was about.
Right. And in many ways, the book is a meditation on that from start to finish. You know, there's thinking about time throughout the book. There's also, for me, a really strong sense of desire and yearning and dreams, particularly the loss of dreams that runs through the collection, which I think is inherited in many ways from your father and your father's lost dreams, just like it was this sheet of music that he had, what was the name of that, the great name of this sheet of music? Oh.
Sweetheart, Say You'll Be Mine?
Yes, Sweetheart, Say You'll Be Not Mine, one of the pieces of music that your dad wrote when he believed he was going to be a famous musician, composer, performer, whatever it was. And even that is aspirational and dreamy. Sweetheart, Say You'll Be Mine is like somebody out of his reach. And there is this sense of like the inheritance of lost dreams or lost aspiration. And I wondered if you could talk about that a bit.
I think that's very insightful. Yeah, I would say I'm the third child in a family. And my mother's childhood experience had a lot of loss and loss of dreams, and my dad had the same experience, but I grew up hearing that over and over and over. If only, if only, if only. Or they had such my mom would always want to go out and visit what she called the home place, which was her parents had built this house themselves. It was a kit house, you know what I mean? The ones that they came across the prairie and you built them. And they had orchards, and they had 4 children, and they had so much promise, and then her mother died when young with what they later learned was polio, and then her father died in a haying accident, and it just all went away. So there was a lot of sense of what could have been. You're not. I'm doing this.
Yeah, just keep coming out.
Sorry.
So, no, you're good.
You got to use your hands when we talk. Okay, thank you. Is that better? Okay.
Are you hearing that in the back well enough? Okay.
But I do, have to be able to turn my head.
Yeah. Right. You were saying, there was a lot of sense of what could have been.
Yeah,
But I guess, it's interesting because I was more thinking of your father's aspirations and
Yeah.
dreams, but your mom had them too. But your mom was more of just a matter-of-fact survivor in the face of this.
well, I think my mothers were attached to her childhood.
Oh,
But then, yes, my dad was a farmer, and they eventually had a farm sale, which was later thought to be the biggest mistake of his life, because that's what he loved and knew, and never really could quite find another niche, and then was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease pretty early. So, yeah.
yeah. And I think this is a pretty also central theme in the book. The book has these recurring themes to it: family, time, loss, things like this, that they come in different forms in the essays, and sometimes 2 or 3 of them are in a single essay, but they keep looping back around again, so that by the time you finish the book, if you read it in its entirety, as I did, you have, it isn't a memoir, of course, but you have a full picture, a fuller picture. So I have followed your writing for a very long time, as I said, beyond 25 years, because I remember when we met after you had graduated and we went for coffee or lunch or something, and I said, I want those stories sent out. Do you remember that? I was like, I want that collection of stories. It was your MFA thesis, and I'm like, I just won't rest until you send that out to a publisher. And of course it got published. That was the beginning of the University of Nebraska doing all of your books, which is pretty remarkable. But one of the things in your work is this sense of the landscape and the sense of the place that you've come from in western Nebraska, the
Right.
Sandhills in particular, or
Well, we lived in a little town in a river valley, and so the Sandhills were, I gotta think of, north of us, and Tableland to the south of us, but, distances, they were close, and we spent time there.
okay. And there's something in all of your books that takes up the power of this landscape, the way the landscape has shaped you as a person, shaped you as a writer, shaped the people who occupied it, and it returns in all of your work, right? It's a constant presence, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about both about that landscape first, and then secondly, what you feel writers gain by kind of honoring or trusting the world that shaped them, or the world as they know it.
Well, sometimes when I've gone out to book clubs, I will ask people to talk about where they were when they were 8 years old, and why it mattered to them. And I've learned, maybe not for everyone, but for a great many people, there is something about the landscape of your childhood, whether it's the Bronx in New York, or Los Angeles, or a foreign country, or in my case, the prairie of Nebraska, that is deeply rooted in our sense of self and home. And I haven't lived in Nebraska. I've lived in Minnesota way longer than I lived in Nebraska. I used to go there frequently because my mom lived in a small town in Nebraska until she was 92. But for me, has anybody been in Nebraska other than on I-80? I-80 doesn't count. But if you drive across Nebraska and you get to Ogallala, that's where the West begins. Suddenly the landscape changes. It's from cornfields to yucca and prairie. And for me, even though I would probably find it very difficult to live there now, there's something inside me that just goes, oh, I'm home. And it has to do with big sky, lots of space, lots of freedom, privacy, even though it's open. And I do think that it certain, you know, if you live on that kind of land and you scrape out a livelihood on it, there's a certain kind of character that gets built from that. So lots of writers have found a home in a sense of place. And I do think that it adds a dimension to the work that helps readers get a full experience. I think that's what we're after as writers, is we want our readers to have an experience that comes to them through the senses and their emotions. And if you know a landscape deeply, it helps.
I'm remembering too that I had 3 of you writing Nebraska books. You, Maureen Millay Smith, who won the Minnesota Book Award for When Charlotte Comes Home, and Patty Frazee writing Circus. And I was like, what am I doing with these 3 Nebraska writers doing all of their theses set in Nebraska, all phenomenal books that ended up being published. And I just was so impressed in all 3 different parts of Nebraska. They had nothing really in common. It wasn't like they were all going over the same material. But there was this just honoring of a place that is flyover country, basically, you know, and this attention to a world that mattered there. And I loved that, and I felt like it infused all of those 3 books, and then has infused your work since then. And I really am struck by that. Then there was this line in your work that I especially loved. When I approach the past, I am in danger of spontaneous combustion. And for me, there's a sensation of spontaneous combustion kind of lurking underneath the prose in this book, you know. It's a steady prose, it's a Nebraska prose, you know, but there is something underneath it moving all the time. And I don't know, I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about that, about the idea of when you approach the past, you're in danger of spontaneous combustion.
Gee.
Well, you wrote it.
I'm feeling bad.
I didn't make that up.
There are having to squint like this with the sun in your
Yes.
face. That's unfortunate. I'm sorry about that. But I think when I wrote that particular line, I was thinking about, you know, you can approach the past, but you can't relive it. And in fact, you're looking maybe for something that never existed, but in your mind it does, and you go looking for it and it's not there, or it gets blown up into something else. I think that's what I was really thinking about. The past, you know, the past it's what it is. It's in the past.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
But it's, I guess I would say it is less nostalgia in this book and more, there's something unsettling about it, because it is there and it's valued, but it's also pressing on your present, possibly pressing on your future. That it's not behind you, it's also with you.
Well, I do think the past is always with you.
Yeah.
And we reinterpret it, and you reimagine it as you go, and you hope that you get more wisdom and compassion as you do that. So, yeah, I think that's right. It does press on the present and the future.
And that leads me, speaking of compassion, to this also great excerpt that I loved from page 65, where you wrote, again beautifully, perhaps this is what it means to gain perspective, to climb a little higher on this spiral staircase of our lives. Looking back, we see it all, every twist and turn, but our vantage point changes, and if we are lucky, deepens with compassion. And I loved that. I thought this image of like climbing the staircase and getting higher up, giving you more and more vantage of what is behind you, and also changing your perspective on it, and deepens your compassion. And I wondered about if you could talk a little bit about the relationship between writing and compassion. Is writing about something a pathway to you to compassion, or do you begin from a place of compassion when you start a work? And this I mean for short fiction, novel, and the pieces in this book. Do you think you arrive at something, or you begin with it?
I think yes to both. I like to think that I start from a place of compassion, but I am interested in exploration and deepening and digging.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that the beauty of creative work, whether it's in writing or theater or wherever it is that it teaches us empathy. And when we practice empathy, we deepen our compassion. Because once you feel the experience of another person, I mean really feel it, then compassion is the byproduct of that. It's much harder to be judgmental once you feel that experience.
And as you took up some of these subjects, your mother, your father, the guy at the class reunion, whatever that situation was with Kim, people that you knew in the past, do you feel that writing about them changed the way you saw them in that time?
I think writing, people have different avenues for reflection, but for me, that's what writing is. And so, yes, of course. I mean,
Yeah.
because it encourages me to imagine their world and their perspective and their experience. And once I've done that, then I have more compassion. Sure.
So one of my favorite pieces is the piece, My Earliest Memory. And I just love all the objects in that piece. I'll never forget them. It's very short. Do you think you could read that?
I think I could. I wonder what page, oh, here it is. Wasn't that fortuitous? I feel like this isn't where it needs to be. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Now I can't see the book because the microphone is in the way. Okay. My earliest memory. I am 3 years old, standing at my desk in the corner of our living room. Hot pink walls shimmer in the afternoon sun. Over the window, a filmy white curtain undulates like a clean sheet when my mother rolls it over the bed. A gold-framed mirror decorated with painted flamingos hangs above a red upholstered couch. Across the room squats a matching red chair. I sometimes sleep in the chair, my head resting on one wide arm, my legs thrown over the other, my body curved in an immovable hammock. When I get up from a nap, the backs of my legs are imprinted with spirals from the pattern in the upholstery. Blonde end tables stand guard at either end of the couch, stepped like stairs held high on rickety stilts. One table holds a lamp with a glass base that doubles as a fishbowl. All the fish die. Crammed next to the stove with the mica-chipped eyes looms a dark, stained, upright player piano. The guts are ruined, so it doesn't play by itself anymore, but my dad can play tunes on it with one hand. People say he plays by ear. I think that's funny because he never puts his ear on the keys. There's a high-heeled table that my parents received as a wedding gift. A starched green doily forms a collar around a second lamp, the base a rearing black ceramic horse topped by a red rectangular shade fringed in black. On either side of the horse, like bookends, hunker two planters shaped like horses' hooves. All the plants die. Gramps' rocker is in the room too, along with a cherrywood secretary, the shelves displaying family photos. When the front is pulled down and resting on its hinges, I can see cubby holes full of papers, Dad's pocket knives, a pair of wire-rimmed glasses. The desk smells like oil and leather, like my daddy's neck above the collar. Against another wall stands Gramps' old library table with encyclopedias lined up on the shelf under it and a Victrola on top. Sometimes my dad makes recordings. He lays a flat black disc on the turntable and plugs in a squawky microphone. My mother giggles and says, "I don't know what to say," and we take turns talking. I don't say much, but my brothers sing a cowboy song that starts, "My home's in Montana, I wear a bandana." On the day I am 3, I am standing at the desk my dad made for me. He fashioned it from plywood, set in a little drawer on the right-hand side, glued slate on top. I don't have a room in this house. I sleep in a crib in the corner of my parents' bedroom. My brothers share a double bed in the other bedroom, wedged between a tall wardrobe and a gun cabinet that holds Dad's hunting rifles. This desk in this corner is the only space that is mine. I stand in the corner and I say to myself, I am 3 years old. This is my desk. I will never forget.
That's so beautiful. All of those objects of that house. I just love them. I can see the place. And that even is infused with this sense of something that was there, that was loved, that was lost, but you hold on to it with such detail. Thank you. I wonder, let's turn it over to the audience and see, do people have questions for Pam?
Looking at dark glasses.
Yeah, go back over here, great.
Just to follow up on your recent question about
Ask, I gotta ask my wife if she's okay, because she's got, are you
for your
okay?
character that looks obvious to me.
still alive.
And did you love them first
Last night.
and then write them, or did you
I
come
heard.
to love them even though there were obstacles in their character?
Oh, in my fiction. you're
Yeah.
talking- Well,
Could you repeat that question just for
Oh,
people
thank
who
you.
didn't hear?
Yes,
I mean,
she
just
had-
briefly
She
paraphrase.
said she thought there was a lot of love for my characters. Did I love them when I started, or did I come to love them? And I would say yes. I don't know why you'd want to spend a whole book, spend all that time with a character you didn't love. And I do love all my characters, even the difficult ones like Gertie, or maybe especially the difficult ones. Yeah, but thank you. I'm glad you feel that way. That would be my hope. Yeah.
I'm waiting for your next book when I'm a character in it.
Bob, did you hear that? He said he's waiting for a book when he's a character in it. It's funny how that works, I'll tell you. Sometimes people think they're characters in your work when they aren't, and then when they are, they don't recognize it. I have to tell this story. When I wrote The Floor of the Sky, a high school classmate of mine asked me to do a phone call, this before we had Zoom and all of that, with her book club in Kansas. And I did, and when I got all done, she got on the phone and very sort of, in a soft voice said, "Pam, I didn't know you knew my brother had an affair." And I said, "I had no idea. Lots of people have affairs, Roseanne." So,
She
find
thought her
that
brother
too.
was somebody in the
Oh,
group.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Tell the rhubarb cake pie story. Going to the book club and they served a rhubarb dish.
Because it was in the book.
Yes, that's a good story.
Well, yes, I think that was that your book club, Kathy? And I have been to book clubs where people tried to serve whatever was talked about.
Oh, I love
And there's a
that.
lot of pie in a Toby likes pie in those Toby books, and blueberry pie and rhubarb. I don't even like rhubarb pie, but I wrote about rhubarb pie.
Oh, I need to put better food in my books.
I know that's something to think about. Next time.
I always have bad food.
Next time it'll be gourmet food, right?
Other?
Yeah.
Yeah, Pam, can you tell us about some of the pieces that didn't fit in the book, like some of the short essay pieces or reflections that didn't make it in the book, and why? Maybe because it was like too exposing, because this is nonfiction.
Yeah. Well, sure, there are things that did not make it into the book. I wrote a long piece about my brother that I don't think was mean. I don't ever want to write something out of a place of getting even or exposing someone's worst traits. But I did write a long piece about my brother when I was mad at him. So it was very helpful for me, and it did not need to be in the book. And other pieces that just seemed to me maybe more about my personal development and did not serve the work of the book.
How do you know when you're finished?
Well, I don't. Oh, like a novel, you mean?
Right.
I mean, something like this. It's a very arbitrary. I just didn't want to do anymore. I mean, I thought, this is enough. If you're writing a novel, of course, you're writing toward some sense of. It could go on forever, couldn't it? I mean, our fictional characters have lives that, unless they're dead at the end, they go on forever, and it could go on. But there's a moment. I don't know how to answer that, Louise. Yet there's a moment, I guess, when you feel that whatever you're after in that moment of that story is complete, or the door is now open for the reader to complete it on their own. I like short stories, and when I wrote my collection of short stories, I very often, I like them because they're predicated on small moments, and they aren't so finished at the end. It's more like a little moment of change that opens a door to a different possibility that then the reader gets to supply and play with. Or at least my fantasy is that they would. Gayla.
I'm wondering, like, when you knew, did you know from the beginning what your 3 sections would be? Or how did that emerge?
Gayla is also a writer and has written a very beautiful book called Memories of Trees. And she blurbed my book, which I'm very grateful for. And she's asking me if I knew about the 3 sections when I started. And I would say no. I'm never that, or I shouldn't say no. I'm typically, I don't start a writing project by thinking. Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I'll have 3 sections about memory, and then what would fit in those? It's more like I start with something that intrigues me, and then later I can see that there are similar themes. It's more like that. There's an essay in here called Cathedrals and Cottonwoods that compares Gaudi's cathedral in Barcelona to a stand of 7 cottonwoods in the sandhills. And that came about because I was sitting amongst I've been to Gaudi's cathedral, and I was sitting amidst these 7 cottonwoods looking up at this beautiful canopy of light, and I had the same transcendent feeling I had in Gaudi's cathedral of lifting and openness, so I wanted to chase that. It comes about more like that.
Maybe one more question?
You say a word about the title, and I read at the corner past the future, I jump to, well, that's the present. But I think maybe there's more layers to that, or what was behind the title, or how'd you come up with that?
Well, that's the title of one of the essays, which is about my 30th class reunion,
That's a great essay, by the way.
which was a long time ago.
Oh, I didn't think of that when I read it. I thought it was very recent.
Well, and kind of what was happening that week of that reunion, it was my 30th class reunion, and Brad, my husband, most of you know, Brad and I graduated in the same year, but not in the same town, and his reunion was the same weekend, so he didn't go with me. And it was in my hometown, and my mother still lived there. So my daughter went with me, and she had just completed her first year of college. And it's one of those essays that's playing with time, because I was so aware that my daughter was heading, her whole life was the future. And my mother was aging in this little town where she wasn't going to be able to stay forever, and her life was in a different place. And I was going to this 30th class reunion trying to I think with unrealistic expectations that I would be able to, go and everybody would immediately love me. That there wouldn't be any awkwardness or, and so that's kind of what it came out of. I just thought we are at these intersections sometimes, we don't know it at the time, where things are changing. I guess that's what I felt. My daughter's life was changing, and our life was changing. My mother's life was going to change, and so kind of like that. And honestly, I didn't title the whole collection that at first, but Clark Whitehorn, the editor at UNL Press, said, "Oh, that's the title."
Oh, wow.
And once he said that, I thought, "Oh, he's right," because it fits all of what's going on so well. Yeah, interesting.
All right.
Thank you.
I have 2 books on the air. No, we're
I
not done.
understand Pam will be signing books, right? Do you want to make an announcement about it?
We'll just proceed very timely in a manner. Kind of last display case, we're gonna.
Okay.
We might not have enough copies for everybody, so we might have to special order some. Just full warning.
Okay. That's a good problem to have.
Yes. Thank you.
Special order. Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Everybody. You're great. I even endured the pain of looking into that sun.
And now the sun is gone.
I'm looking at the best thing at the bottom. I think I'll just stay put for There's people over there.
You're very kind, thank you. You're my new favorite person. Richard is my name.
I'm Bob.
Hi, Bob, thank you.
That, sorry.
I can crawl out a better bar and